So 3:15, we've coming towards the end of our agenda for the day, and we've got an exciting presentation from Ashley Hannon from Mitacs. So Dr. Ashley Hannon is a business development director with Mitacs, Inc., serving the Waterloo-Wellington corridor. Ashley's responsibilities at Mitacs include connecting with local academic researchers and assist industry with their R&D challenges by creating and maintaining a network of contacts through the local universities, colleges, and industries. She provides support for collaborations between partners, which can leverage Mitac funding opportunities. Ashley's ultimate goal is to increase academic research partnerships for a more innovative Canada. So, Ashley, there's a quick intro, and I'll turn the controls over to you and tell us what's going on in the collaborative funding for AI.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today. Thanks to all the organizers. It's been a wonderful day. So hopefully I can top it off and give you some ideas for how to fund some of these great projects. So as you all know, AI is an integral part of conversations happening at every level of society. So today's been a great day kind of highlighting all the different ways and where the AI-based tools are useful. And I think that's a really great way to put it. So it's not really an option anymore. You know, the global impact is really, you know, as much as 13.1 million we're looking at by 2025. And the companies of the future are going to be successful because they're planning for this today if they haven't already begun. And so a lot of these tools, you know, on their own face value are becoming a basic commodity in some of our larger enterprises that may have really big budgets. It's also a tool that we want to be able to make sure that our SMEs are also able to explore and support, you know, whether they're early on or a little more advanced in their needs as well. So we want to make sure that that opportunity really does support the Canadian economy as a whole, and it's really seen that development's been massive in the last decade or so. So really, when we're talking about collaborative research, you know, the first hurdle is to figure out where to start if you're not there yet, right? And that can be a bit of a daunting task. There's lots of great people here that, you know, have at least a foot in the water, but and there's some that are very deeply and heavily involved, and our researchers are really great in supporting these types of projects. So you know, the first thought is, you know, what's keeping you up at night? What are some of those challenges that you are experiencing where we might be able to deploy AI tools? And so looking at, you know, maybe it's understanding your client base a little bit better and gaining those insights, or improving your operational efficiency. You know, supply chain has been brought up a few times today as well, and that's certainly a challenge. It has been absolutely in the last year, you know, and we think back to what Loblaws has been tasked with. And so there's a lot of different areas and where AI tools can be deployed in successful ways to really create data analytics and really strong data-driven decision making. And that's great, but you know, do you have data, right? That's usually the first question, and that's a really good place to start. You know, some may have great swaths of data where you have an idea of what you'd like to do with it, but you could also be at a point where you haven't even collected data yet, and you're not even sure what data to collect. And so you know, that's okay, and that means it's a really good time to bring in experts and bring in that knowledge base to help you get from a stage where you're not quite ready to something that can be fully deployable and supportive of what your organization's been working on. And so really, we want to help support projects in the AI space that are collaborative. And so by bringing together, you know, experts from Canadian universities and great researchers like from Waterloo AI, and with the additional benefit of some funding support, it just makes it a little less daunting if you haven't gotten started yet. And so really we're past that infancy stage, and we really want to make sure that these tools are deployable and effective in your place of work. So we're really here to help with some of those initial steps, and really we're here to make sure all those connections get built. So what is Mitacs? Our organization is a national not-for-profit. We receive both federal and provincial funding to support our initiatives. And we have long been a pioneer in the Canadian AI ecosystem. We've built strong collaborations between industry and academia for the last 21 years now. We're rolling up on 22 in about 2 weeks. So we've been around a while. We do have a really broad network of expertise to help support your needs. So by supporting Canadian companies, we're exploring these AI cutting edge areas, could be helping support talent pipelines to maintain Canadian leadership role in the AI ecosystem. Other things we might be looking at is building these human bridges. So what I mean by that is we connect our industry partners with our academic partners through the human bridge of internships. So by bringing our highly qualified personnel as a person to support both the work going on the campus, but also tackling these real world, really tangible problems and challenges that you're seeing in your own business. And the nice thing is we support collaboration at any stage of the development and talent in the development pipeline. And so things from developing new technologies to looking at something absolutely brand new, and we can de-risk that by providing some of that extra funding. So it's a really nice way to help support projects, at any stage of the pipeline here, which is really great. And the nice thing about working with Mitacs is we've built a really strong foundation to help support these projects right from the beginning. We know there's challenges to launching AI-related projects, things from, in some cases, the lack of expertise, not knowing the resources you have or the resources you need to have a successful project. Maybe it's you're not quite sure exactly where to find them. Could be a lack of funding as well, or fear of taking these projects on. And so Mitacs is here to really help support all of these bits and pieces to really create strong projects from the bottom up. So we do have quite a broad team that is able to help support it. So we might be helping support by connecting yourself to our national research network, which is always really great. And we're bringing together these students that do have these backgrounds in AI disciplines with our multinationals and our SMEs across Canada, including our rural communities and different sectors, so that these sectors can then benefit from these tools that are being created in our academic ecosystem. And the other nice thing is we do have a quick turnaround, and that's because we know deep learning is dynamic and the speed of development in AI research is moving quickly. We do have avenues to support really quick turnarounds on projects. In most cases, it's a 6 to 8 week turnaround, but even in some cases, we're looking at about 2 weeks from project submission through our review process to start. I did mention we have a pretty broad team. So there's roughly 84 of me across the country. We're predominantly based in academic institutions or very closely related to our academic institutions. However, we do have other Mitacs team members that are based potentially in incubators, in innovation hubs, in other funding agencies, for example. And so by having that really strong network, it really allows us to help find the expertise your organization needs. My role is really to support the work that's going on specifically at Waterloo. So if you aren't sure of who to connect with, I'm happy to help support that, as I'm sure Harold is as well. And so we work very closely together to help make sure that you're supported during that whole process of project development. And then from here, we're helping build these connections with you along the way. And the nice part is we're providing up to 55% of the funding towards a dedicated project. And so our Accelerate Research program is built in a module structure. And so what that means is, we have these pieces that are unit or the module of funding, for example. And it's the smallest amount we can do. And typically what that involves is an academic faculty member from an institution at the college or university level. So it could certainly be a professor from Waterloo AI. We have a student intern, so that could be a college level student, master's, PhD, or postdoctoral fellow, depending on the needs of the project and the complexity of the project. And we have an industry partner or a not-for-profit partner. And so that's kind of the bare minimum to get a project started. And these can typically be as short as 4 months in length. If we're looking for, maybe it's a quick proof of concept potentially, where we're not quite sure what we want to do, but we do need to put some expertise on this to really get some answers. And that's really nice as a starting point. So some examples I've pulled specifically from Waterloo and our AI researchers are taking a look at space debris. That's certainly a challenge when launching new, for example, satellites up into space. And so that navigation around all of that space debris is certainly a big challenge. They often use machine learning techniques, but that often means that they're relying on this learning process, and so the accuracy can vary. And I'm sure if you're launching something, you want to make sure that the cost going into it is also being supported, and you want to make sure that you have a successful launch. So in this particular project with Professor Azad, they were able to really enhance the data and the training procedures to help create a more effective model in terms of, or algorithm in terms of the predictions for their deployments. And in another smaller example, I believe Professor Chen was chatting about this earlier this morning briefly. So this is obviously a very timely example. So taking a look at the charting in medical records and gleaning insights in from that. So building the algorithm to better understand, clinical notes, which if you've ever seen a doctor's handwriting can certainly be a bit of a challenge at the best of times. So this was really great. It was a short-term project, and recently they said, things are going really well, and we'd like to explore phase 2 and enhance what has already been working on, which is absolutely fantastic to hear. Now, those are fairly small projects, and those are absolutely fine, and we do appreciate those for sure. It's a great starting point. But we also allow our model to be a little more flexible, and it creates an opportunity to have a bespoke research program directed towards the needs of your organization directly. And so you can stack those little modules in series or parallel, however is needed for your research program. So what that could mean is you have several researchers affiliated with the project. They could be from different institutions. If you work very closely with other industry partners yourself, we can also add them onto the project. So we do create a really collaborative environment to really make this innovation move forward. And it's a really nice way to plan out long-term goals and find a way to execute on them. So the example I'd like to present to you here is with an organization called Myant, based just outside Toronto. We have a fairly large-scale project with them that's currently underway. It's led at the University of Toronto, but we do have Waterloo researchers involved in this project, and we're looking at smart textiles here, which is a really interesting space. And so one of Myant's challenges was looking at the need to build out their R&D talent pipeline and lean on the expertise of our academics in Canada to really support the work going on in their R&D space. And so this project has 99 internships. We couldn't quite get it to 100, but that's kind of a little running joke at Mitacs. And so through these 99 internships, it's a little bit more of a siloed approach where we have this big umbrella proposal and really looking at generating this garment and creating something effective and useful for the world. So we're looking at things like sensor design and textile creation and building out those algorithms and the computing architecture here to really create something that is useful to the population it's designed for. So it's a really great example of how you can really grow a project in large scale as well. Now, some of you might be thinking, "Oh, that's really great. We have all these project ideas in the works, and that's wonderful." But maybe you're not quite sure where you fit in yet, or you haven't quite taken the plunge yet. And so, as we've expanded our AI strategy in the last little while, there's been a focus on, we're not ready for that research component yet, and that's certainly understandable. It can be overwhelming, and so we've introduced another flexible, alternative version of our Accelerate platform where it's a shorter duration project and not as research intensive. And so we call it our Accelerate assessment. And so shorter term project, shorter turnaround time, and really it's looking at assessing the situation that your company is currently finding yourselves in, and basically having that guidance and support of experts to help figure out how to get where you'd like to go. And so this was a project with Crozier Consulting Engineering, and they're looking at figuring out what and determining those optimization opportunities that could be realized through integrating AI into their workflows and business plans. And so, that's a really high level challenge, right? They just don't really know where to get started. You have some data that is really, really great, strong data with lots of information in it. And you may have other data sets that are a little lacking or might be missing some key information. And so by having an intern take a really deep dive into where they're at and what might be their next steps is a really great opportunity to use that expertise and guide where you can go and basically help with the technology readiness of your next steps. Now, all of this being said, we do work with a number of partners. I mentioned we work very collaboratively with other funding partners, other organizations, and the reason we do this is to bring as much value as possible to the organizations we're working with. Oftentimes, we want to make sure that your time is being respected, and we want to make sure that the time we do have with you is the most beneficial to yourselves and your project, and also the financing standpoint too, right? So we want to make sure that things are as smooth and effective with the types of funding partners we work with. So you might be familiar with our Tri-Council funders. We are hoping we'll have an announcement with NSERC that should be really exciting in the next couple of weeks as to what our new agreement with NSERC looks like. Another example is our agreement with OCI. So you might be familiar with their VIP program. We do have a streamlined review process where we add Mitacs Accelerate onto VIP projects to either extend the ability for HQP to join the project and sometimes extend the duration of the project as well. And another example that isn't a funding organization, but SOCIP, which you may or may not be familiar with, is part of the FedDev programs down in Southern Ontario, and it's really to help support from a tool standpoint. So they have both CPU and GPU power and expertise to help basically manage the data crunching side of things. So they're not necessarily a funder in a traditional sense, but they are a support to projects, and we do work with them very closely. And because of that, what I'd actually like to quickly plug here is we do have an ongoing clean tech initiative that launched earlier this month. So if you do have a project in that clean tech space and do need that extra, computing power, whether it's to maybe test something out before you have to go and use your Amazon credits or something along the lines of that, this is a way where projects supported through Mitacs would actually have their SOCIP access fee waived, and so that's a really nice way to promote activity in the space where there's still some collaborative research going on. And so there's lots of initiatives going on at Mitacs to really support the work going on in AI across all fields and disciplines and areas. So we're here to really support all of what AI is capable of. And so, as I mentioned, becoming data-driven overall is fundamental but necessary change for a lot of the companies if they haven't been there yet. And so basically understanding that AI is an option if you haven't quite explored it yet. If you have, it's where else might we be able to support enhancing it. But we want to make sure that we're here to help you along the way. And so that journey must start now. And with that, I'd like to thank our funders across the country. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, thanks, Ashley. You started off saying that we're going to keep this short and you're going to get off early, and I'm thinking, no way, I'm going to hit her with the tough questions.
Uh-oh.
So here's a tough one for you. Is there a rough number of proposals you get that are approved or disapproved, percentage-wise?
So we don't like to put a number on it because it does fluctuate month to month, which, of course, is with any funding agency. But the good news we've had from our funders up to this point is keep going. So unlike some organizations where there's really tight constraints, our job is to say yes. And so by having a team with the supports of people like myself, we're there to help make sure it's looking as strong as possible before the submission and making sure that it hits all those right notes along the way. So I would say it's very rare we would see a project that puts all the effort in that does not get approved. Okay,
so then building on that question, is there and when the proposal come in, is there a qualification of the research, the researcher, or both? Or elaborate a bit on that, please.
Sure. So in terms of eligibility, it does change a little bit. So in terms of from the faculty standpoint, so as I mentioned, each project does need to have a faculty member that's Tri-Council eligible, affiliated with the project, and that's to hold the funds, of course, provide expertise where helpful as well. And from the industry side, basically, as long as you're incorporated and have a bricks and mortar, the idea is that we want to support everything from small startups and even student-led startups all the way up through to multinationals. So really broad strokes there. So for-profit in Canada, and we do have some leeway internationally as well with that. And then, of course, we can work with Canadian not-for-profits, which might be interested in deploying these types of resources too, as we've had the stream of AI for good, and I think a lot of that may fit in there. So it is pretty broad strokes right now, but if anybody does have any questions about eligibility, I'm happy to answer those specifically too.
Okay, so you touched on one area there. You said if we have the research happening here at Waterloo student, Waterloo professor, but the funder is from outside of Canada, does that make things complicated, shall we say?
Well, as we've learned in the last little while, international is certainly a little more complicated than usual, but there usually is a little more paperwork involved, and at the end of the day, the project does need to benefit Canada, and our funders are the Canadian government, so we want to make sure that that the Canadian ecosystem will be benefiting at the end of the day from the project, but we certainly can work with companies in our partner countries, and so that list does fluctuate a little bit, so I don't want to go into details, but we do work with a lot of different organizations across the world, and that's probably one of the more exciting pieces as well, is that we can support that.
Okay, so this is my last question for you then. You did very quickly on one slide, as you lowered your breath, said we roughly fund 50%, and then you move to the next slide. So what if you put that now in the industry's mindset, is that a quote unquote, a one-to-one match for their dollars roughly then?
Yeah, so in some cases it's a one-to-one match. In some cases it's a 1-to-1.22 match. It often depends on the size and scope of project as to what makes sense. So it's really best practice to engage us early in those conversations so we can help strategize and maximize the value for the dollars going into the project. But typically in most cases we do see that one-to-one.
Okay, I said that was my last question, but I lied. So one more.
No worries.
Of course, like the feedback and things we're getting from a day like today, hopefully we find that more projects come your way. The question I keep getting, or we keep getting in our organization is, oh, I've heard of this Mitacs thing, and then the industry partner says, what do I have to do? So is this something on their shoulders? and we're trying to take that off, that quote unquote burden or effort off them. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Absolutely, and we certainly agree that this going through the application process is likely not their best use of time either. So so we do want to make sure that the projects again, we're interacting pretty early on in these conversations to help ensure success, but also in terms of the requirements, there is a site requirement right now. We have an option for virtual given the situation, but typically the expectation is that they are collaborative projects, meaning that the interns will be spending time on site with the partner organization during the duration of the project. So again, there's some flexibility in what that looks like, but there does need to have some resources to support that, which is a bit unique to Mitacs. But the whole idea being, that collaborative nature of these students understanding those real world challenges while they're actually in that industry setting, but then also leaning back on their academic expertise. And so that being one of their requirements. In terms of proposal writing, we typically lean on the academics to write most of it with input from the partners. Of course, they do need to sign off on it and be happy with what's in there. And then, paying the invoices. So we do send our invoices out, and to get projects started, we do need to have the funds kind of come our way before we can release anything to campus to kickstart a project. And at the very end, there's a quick survey monkey survey, which may or may not have changed in the last little while, but it's pretty short and quick. And that's because we want to really support the project and make sure that time is well spent.
Okay, well, that's awesome. You're right there on time, and you survived all the questions. So thank you so much for your presentation today. This was excellent.
You're welcome.